morning, guys. Today I want to talk to you about something that's been weighing pretty heavily on my heart. And last night I finished a book that has completely changed my perspective, and I know it's going to change my life. And I'm hoping that if you guys are interested in reading this book, that it will do the same for you. So the book that I'm referring to is called Boundaries. And it is a book about when to say yes to commitments or people and how to say no. This book on Amazon has 2,154 reviews at 4.5 stars, and I have to attest to the fact that this book is phenomenal. This book is biblically based, and this is what the product description says. Christians often focus so much on being loving and giving that they forget their own limits and limitations. Have you ever found yourself wondering, can I set limits and still be a loving person? How do I answer someone who wants my time, love, energy, or money? And why do I feel guilty when I consider setting boundaries? And boundaries in this book is defined as personal property lines that define who you are and who you are not, and it influences all areas of your life. So for example, physical boundaries can help you determine who may touch you and under what circumstances. Mental boundaries give you the freedom to have your own thoughts and opinions. Emotional boundaries help you deal with your own emotions and disengage from harmful, manipulative emotions of others. So I picked up this book in hopes that it would bring new health to my relationships with other people, commitments, and even with myself. This book is really dense, but at the same time, it's really easy to read because for myself, while I was going through this book, I just felt like I could relate to so many of the different situations that the book talks about and the different characters in here. So the book starts out with this woman. She is a wife, mother, daughter. It paints you a picture of a day in her life, starting from the moment she wakes up and how she's already exhausted before getting out of bed. She has a son who is misbehaving at school and always acting out. And as she's going through the day in her head, she's thinking about all the things she needs to do. And one of them is she has to finish sewing a costume for her daughter for her school play or something. Yeah. So she planned to sew this costume the night before. But Sherry, the lady, I don't know if I mentioned her name earlier, but her mother unexpectedly dropped in to hang out. And when she told her mom that she was very overwhelmed because she has to put this costume together for her daughter, her mom kind of guilt tripped her and said stuff like, oh, ever since your father died, I've been really lonely and who'd want to hang out with me? And Sherry just ended up tossing the whole costume stitching out the window, and she felt like she was being a bad daughter. So she abandoned her responsibility as a mother, to accompany her own mother. So the visit with her mom lasted well into the night, and she just felt really crazy by the end of it. And the next morning, this is why she was so tired. Her husband was, barking at her about why she can't get her kids to the table on time. And after finally sending the kids off to school, she was in a rush to get to work herself. And she's hurriedly putting makeup in the car and just feeling really overwhelmed. So she goes into work. She has this boss that constantly throws stuff at her at the last minute, things that don't fall under her roles and responsibilities. And instead of saying hey, I'm sorry, I can't handle that right now, I have my own things that I need to take care of, she feels like she's letting her boss down or she's not being a good employee. So she just takes on all this extra work, right? That doesn't belong to her. And in the middle of the workday, she has this friend that just always calls whenever she's in need without even ever asking how Sherry herself is doing. And even with that friend, she's unable to say, hey, I can't talk right now. Can we catch up later? Because her friend also guilt trips her into thinking that she's being a bad friend or that she's being selfish. And so she has all these voices in her head that keeps telling her that she needs to be responsible for all of these people. And at first when I read this, I was just thinking man, she has some pretty crappy people in her life that are not supportive, that just want to keep taking from her. But as I'm reading the book more and more, Sherry is the one with the problem because she doesn't know her boundaries in the sense that she doesn't know where she ends and the other person begins. And the book talks about how every single person has their own load to carry every day. Think of it as a knapsack. So everyone has their own knapsack to hold. And then we have bigger problems, which are more like burdens that people in your life that you have relationships with can help you carry. But a lot of the people in Sherry's life expect her to carry her own knapsack, to take on their knapsacks as well, and she's just crumbling. So Sherry goes through her workday, and when she finally gets home, she is in a hurry to like make dinner, but then of course the kids don't help out. Like they show up late to the table. Her husband is complaining because the food is cold. And then during dinner, she gets a phone call from like a group she's in at church, and the leader of that group is asking her to lead something, like a retreat or something, because someone else backed out. And again, same story. That person kind of makes Sherry feel bad. Like, if you want to be a good Christian, then, you know, you should help me out because I'm in need. And so again, Sherry goes through the whole, okay, if I don't do this, I'm a bad person. She unwillingly agrees to take on helping this lady out. And you guys, okay, and I'm sure you guys get the point by now. I'm sure some of you are frustrated with Sherry. I definitely felt like that, and I think it was because I could really relate to her in so many ways. And I don't mean to come off in this video like I'm complaining about my life, because that's not what it is about at all. And this book isn't about finding people to blame for, you know, feeling overwhelmed or just anxious all the time. And as a Christian, it's selfish when you don't give yourself to other people and you're not there for other people. But this book makes it really clear that in order for you to have the time and the resources to invest in other people, you need to invest in yourself first. This book is so helpful in just unpacking and teaching you how to deal with people that get upset at you for not meeting their expectations. It talks about unresolved childhood issues you might have. Like, for example, maybe you're someone who lacks boundaries because growing up, you know, you had a parent where anytime you didn't do something that they asked or told you to do, the response you got from them is them taking away their love from you. And as a child, you're largely dependent, you know, in so many ways on your parents. And so a lot of people grow up just being compliant because they are afraid of being rejected and not receiving love from the people that need to give it to you unconditionally. It talks about how if you can teach your own kids how to set their own boundaries, you will set them up for life. So for example, if an adult is behaving inappropriately with your child, if you teach them healthy boundaries, you're giving them the tools to be able to say, no, that's not okay. It's not okay for you to talk to me that way or to, you know, touch me inappropriately. At a certain age, you teach them ownership. It's like the whole thing about not forcing your kids to share. It's like if something belongs to them, like they need to know that they have ownership of this item. And if they decide that they want to share whatever it is, their toy or whatever, you give them the freedom to know that they can share this toy out of love because it belongs to them and they care about this person, rather than out of fear. If I don't share this toy, this person is not going to be friends with me anymore. And you know, that bleeds into middle school and high school when things become a lot more dangerous, you know, for girls, like dating the wrong kind of guys that might take advantage of them because they don't know how to say no, and then having your child end up doing things that they'll regret, you know, to appease that relationship that they might have with their significant other. Another thing that really resonated with me is the fact that you are not responsible for someone else's emotions. So if someone asks something of you and you're unable to meet that expectation and you let them know like, hey, I'm really sorry, I'd love to help you out, but, and in return the person, you know, shows hostility or anger towards you, you are not responsible for how they react, right? You can be responsible to a person, but you are not responsible for a person. So before I read this book, I'd only heard about the term boundaries from Gail, because my friend Gail studied conflict resolution in school, and man, she is just so full of wisdom, and on top of that, she's really good about dealing with conflict, and that's something that I struggle with a lot. Like even you know, when Brandon and I get into arguments, a lot of times if something upsets me, I'm unable to explain it to him in a way where I let him know like, hey, I feel hurt because of this action. And instead, a lot of times it'll come out like, I can't believe you did this, you're a bad person, I can't believe you're making me feel this way, I'm your wife. And it's very manipulative if I really think about it. I don't mean to come off attacking Brandon, because the whole purpose is I want him to understand me and I want him to know why it is I feel this way. But at the same time, he's not responsible for the way that I react to certain situations. Yes, he can be responsible to me in terms of hearing me out and hearing out my hurt, or even being there full-heartedly when I disagree with him. It's not his job to fix how I feel. And before I read this book, I would have never said that out loud. I wouldn't even know to say that out loud. On the topic of responsibility, I've learned that rescuing people is actually one of the most hurtful things you can do for them. Like, for example, if you are a parent with a grown-up child, and that child, because you've done everything for them their whole life, now they are like financially irresponsible, because they think that, okay, if it ever comes down to not having any money, it's okay because I can just call up my parents and they'll, cover things for me. So in the case of the grown-up child, what the parent needs to do is to just cut that child off financially, so that the next time they're in a bind and they end up spending all of their money recklessly, that they are faced with consequences. They need to feel the pain so that it prevents them from making stupid decisions later on. And that is the best way for that parent to love that child, is to let them suffer the consequences of their behavior. Along the same vein, like if you are working for a boss who, is always dumping projects on you or deadlines that are not your responsibility, if you keep bailing that person out and, keep taking on stuff for them, then they never actually get to do the work. And if you just give them a little bit, they'll just keep taking advantage of the fact that they can rely on you. And in fact, that character that they talked about in the book, Sherry, she would take on this entire load of stuff for her boss. And eventually, when she decided that she needs to set some clear boundaries, it wasn't until then that her boss's boss realized that he never did any of the work himself, that it was all Sherry all along. As a result, her boss got demoted and suffered the consequences of not carrying his own load. So there is a whole series of these boundary books, but I've only read this first one. But there are more specific ones, like how to set boundaries in marriage, how to set boundaries with your kids, etc. After finishing this book, I just feel really renewed, and I haven't figured everything out yet, or how I'm going to approach different commitments and relationships in my life, but it's definitely just really opened my eyes about not taking on such guilt. Because guilt and fear, they're not from God. God doesn't want you to live a life where you just feel guilty and fearful all the time. I'm going to work on how to have healthy relationships with everyone, including myself. I know that I take on a lot of things because I feel guilty if I don't. And guilt and fear are the worst motivators to do something. Whether you're a Christian or not, I highly recommend this book to you. At this point, if someone asked me for one book recommendation, I think this would be it. And if any of you guys are curious, I did take a little break from The Compound Effect because I found that reading that book was stressing me out, because I couldn't really sit there, read it, soak it in, and enjoy it as much as I should have, because as I'm reading it, I felt like all I was thinking about was, how am I going to talk about this, during my morning chats? Like, how am I going to summarize this chapter? What am I going to pull out, And it really overwhelmed me. So I took a little break from that. I am going to pick it up again now that I'm done with this Boundaries book. I wasn't even planning to talk about this book, but because it has left such a big impact on me, this was unplanned. I just needed it to come out and share with you guys in case you may be struggling with the same things. I'd love to know if this is something that you guys struggle with as well. Is this something, am I just sounding crazy, or, do you have certain relationships in your life where you feel like they're out of control, you don't know what to do about them, and you take on more than you need to because the voices in your head tell you that you're a bad person if you don't? Will you guys let me know in the comments below? And if you aren't like me, and you are good about setting your boundaries, what are some steps that you take to let the other party know that, you know, you still care about them, you still love them, but you can't fix whatever problem it is that they have. And if any of you guys have already read this book, please share your thoughts with me too. Or even just let me know if you are interested in reading this book if you haven't. It's super, super important, especially if you're just learning how to set boundaries, that you are in a supportive group of friends that are like-minded and, you know, that will support you, especially in the beginning when it's going to be super hard. You know, when you start saying no to things, you are going to hurt people, not maliciously, but, you know, feelings will get hurt. So yeah, it would help me out a lot if you guys can share some of your stories or some of the struggles and hurdles that you've gotten through. So to share a little bit more personally with you guys, there is someone that I'm working with that is a total boundary invader. Well, I guess it's not fair to say that because I never really set any clear boundaries, but after reading this book, I've realized that I think it would be best for us to go our separate ways, and I need to have this hard conversation because this one relationship that I have has been really taking a toll on me. I just don't think it's healthy. So I think I'm going to have to say bye to one of my clients. Well, saying that out loud and publicly is kind of terrifying, but gotta dance with the fear. What a super heavy morning talk, huh? Nothing like talking about boundaries to start off your Monday morning. I'm gonna get started with my day. Thank you guys for listening to me for, I don't even know how long this video is going to be, but I hope you have a great week and I will catch you this Thursday in my next video. Bye guys.